Dungeons. You know how they work. You draw a map, it has rooms, you write little numbers in the rooms, you write up a room key describing each room. If you don't know how dungeons work, that's okay. For some reason, the D&D rulebooks don't teach you how to do that anymore. Grab a copy of So You Want to Be a Game Master, or hit the subscribe button down below. I'll be doing a Dungeons 101 video very soon. But if you do know how dungeons work, then you know that when the PCs start exploring the dungeon, you just look at the room they're in, describe it, and let them do stuff until they run out of stuff to do. Then they pick an exit, go to the next room, and you describe the new room. Then you simply repeat this until the dungeon is done. Oh, but wait a minute. The PCs are in one room and then they go to another room. But how do they get there? I mean, maybe the rooms are right next to each other, but in a lot of dungeons, the way you get from one room to another is by following a corridor. Corridors, of course, can be any number of things. Hallways, tunnels, courtyards, passages, shafts, stairs. But because they typically don't appear in the dungeon key, they often end up defaulting to blank ciphers or generic mush, just empty expanses of gray stone or featureless utility spaces. But that's not the way corridors work in the real world. And in our adventures, it's a missed opportunity for world building. Now, to avoid this, of course, you could just add every hallway to your key. In practice, though, this takes a lot of work, and it also tends to bloat your dungeon key and map in ways that aren't really useful. So what you can do instead is add a corridor themes section to your dungeon key. Now, what you want here is a palette that you can draw from to flexibly describe hallways on the fly as the PCs pass through them. For example, in a haunted house, your corridor theme might be torn red carpets, a painting with eyes that follow you, broken furniture, cobwebs, broken glass on the floor, and creaking floorboards. Now, I've been using the word dungeon here because that's how most of us are introduced to the location crawl scenario structure. But you can use location crawls in a lot of different situations and in any genre. Now, if the PCs are exploring a megacorp's arcology in Cyberpunk, for example, you might have potted plants, security cameras, motivational propaganda posters, color-coded section stripes on the walls, navigational signs, touchscreen directories, maintenance drones, and vending machines. I mean, the only limit is your imagination. And once you've built your corridor themes, you can think of them as a menu. Whenever the players are walking down a new hallway, just grab a couple items from the menu, combine them with the navigational details from the map, and paint a picture for your players. Your bare feet sink into the torn red carpet that runs the length of the hallway. Down one side of the hall, you can see 3 doors with cobwebs clinging to their lintels. It's just that simple. Now you don't want to use every element in every hallway, obviously, but it's okay to reuse elements. I mean, the whole point is that these are common features found throughout the location. And since I'm constantly mixing and matching these elements, dropping them in as needed, my corridor themes are generally just a brief list of bullet points, like the ones you've seen here. If you wanted to, though, you could number your theme elements and turn them into a kind of random table. Grab 2d6 or 3d6, roll them, and grab the matching results for each die from your corridor themes table. If you roll matching numbers, that hallway just has the one thing. Or maybe an unusual number of that thing. Whatever makes sense. You can also write your corridor themes down on a post-it note and affix it to your GM screen. If you watched our video on how to become a better GM, which I'll link to in the font of all knowledge down below, you might be using a similar technique already for your practice points. Having this kind of stuff at your fingertips is exactly what a GM screen is for, and is another reason to keep your corridor themes short and sweet, so that they can easily fit. But if a specific corridor theme needs more detail to make it useful, then prep what you need. For example, our arcology featured color-coded stripes on the wall, identifying what section of the complex we're in. Would it be useful to have a master list of what each color means? If you think so, write them down. But in general, the continuity of what you describe usually isn't too important. You're painting a picture over time, and you don't need to perfectly repeat the description of each hallway if the PCs do double back. If the players do take special notice of some specific detail, though, that's fine. Since it might stick out in their memory, it may be useful to make a note on your map so that you can remember that it's there, but in my experience, this is rarely, if ever, necessary. Corridor themes are also a great way to enhance a published adventure. You'll probably only need a couple of minutes after reading the dungeon to jot down a half dozen or so thematic elements, but in play, it'll level up the whole experience for you and the players. If you're prepping or running a larger dungeon, on the other hand, you may discover that it has several distinct sections. For example, the castle versus the dungeon beneath it, or the dwarven armories versus the fungal farms. All you need to do is prep a separate corridor theme for each section, and you'll be good to go. Oh, once you start slicing a dungeon up into sections like this, though, don't fall into the trap of prepping too many corridor themes. Your goal is still to capture broad features of the dungeon, not describe every individual corridor. Some corridors are more important than others. Sometimes you'll have a hallway that's truly unique or has some featured element that's important to the scenario. Maybe there's a secret door, or a devious trap, or a weird painting that contains an important clue. If a particular corridor or section of a corridor is important, then you should just, go ahead and key it like a room, or any other featured element in the dungeon. And if you're looking for inspiration in creating cool corridor themes, check out DSCRYB, the sponsor of today's video. Not only is their professionally written box text a great way to enhance or stock your dungeon rooms, but you can also pull evocative thematic details for your corridors. For example, semi-randomly opening a couple of DSCRYB's hundreds of free place descriptions lets me quickly assemble a fresh corridor theme for the cave complex my players will be exploring next week. Fragments of rock and soil, multi-hued mineral deposits, a salty smell in the air, and maybe milky white stalactites. Use the link below to explore free scenes, interactive maps, amazing NPCs, and immersive adventure soundtracks for both fantasy and science fiction settings. Good gaming. This is Justin Alexander, and I'll see you at the table.